Fantastic. Okay, first and foremost, some introductions. A bit about Millpond. So if you're not aware of Millpond, who we are, we're an organisation that operates across New Zealand and Australia. We do all things in and around project delivery. So whether it's project managers, business analysts, change managers, working out on client site, helping our clients deliver their projects. We do a bit of consulting around setting up PMOs, supporting PMOs. We go through and do post-implementation reviews, health checks, governance support, things like that. And I guess the role that I operate in is in the training space. We operate our training across New Zealand, Australia, sometimes further abroad, speaking on the world stage in and around anything to do with helping people do well with their projects. We have been a partner of PMI since about 2015, so a number of years here. We have partners with a number of PMI chapters across Australia and New Zealand. We're big fans of helping organisations address their pain points in delivering projects and the growth of their people. Big fan of mentoring as well. Myself and my business partner met through a PMI mentoring program. So that's us in a nutshell. I know there's a lot of people on this call who are our current and past clients, so good to see you here. Bit about myself, and I hand over to Brandon and Ben shortly. So I'm one of the directors of Millpond. I sort of wear a number of hats. I also volunteer with PMI and Z, but when I'm not doing that, I'm delivering projects for clients and I'm organising training programs and delivering training programs. Our biggest client right now is BHP, where we're helping a team of people across Australia, Santiago and Chile, and Saskatoon and Canada, going through some capability programs. And when I'm not doing that, doing some PMI, PMP, ACP training as well. That's myself. Brandon, yourself, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, and good morning and good afternoon and good evening to everyone on the call. My name is Brandon Byford. I live here in Auckland, New Zealand. I have 16 years of experience in project controls and project management. I was lucky enough to come across Mike and the Millpond team a few years in the past, and they were the ones who spearheaded my PMI journey. I've worked across many different markets and industries across the globe. But again, the main topic has always been project management, project controls. And one of the things that's been really spearheaded and motivated me was in the construction space. So we got really excited once PMI said, hey, we're going to have a construction management professional certification to really take my skill set to the next level and provide consultation to my clients and my team members to do a better job out in that field. And of course, Ben will talk a little bit about that before we go more in depth. So it's a privilege to have everybody on the call and looking forward to today's webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon. And Ben, over to you, please.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. Hi to everybody on the call. It's my pleasure to be here. A little bit of background to myself. I'm a structural engineer turned project manager. And I'm originally from Australia, from Melbourne, but I've been living in Singapore for just over 30 years. That milestone clicked over just last month, in fact. So I joined PMI about 5 years ago now to head up the Asia Pacific region. And when I joined, because I had a strong construction background, it was always the view for me to look at the construction industry and is that a focus area for PMI. So I'll talk a little bit about the history of the certification shortly. One thing I would say is throughout my career, I've always been really surprised just how disconnected the construction industry is. If you go from project to project, there seems to be different processes, that different ways of getting things done, and that's even if you are within the same company. So it always felt like to me that there must be a better way of doing this. So that's what I'll talk through today. So great to be here.
Excellent. Thanks, Ben. Looking at the chat, we've got people from Sydney, Melbourne, Tasmania, Auckland, Canterbury, Wellington, Perth. A good mix. So awesome. I'll be putting in some questions in the chat while we're talking today. So look out for those and share your thoughts and comments. Okay, Ben, can you please take us through a bit of the history, where PMI-CP has come from, where it's going, what the purpose is?
Sure. I think the best place to start off is just by looking at the state of the construction industry. And, McKinsey has done a lot of work in this space. You can see from this slide that the construction industry is the biggest in the world. It makes up about 13% of GDP. But for many years, it's been performing extremely badly. There is a huge amount of global infrastructure going on around the world, nearly $70 trillion. And I think throughout the pandemic, that number actually grew because a lot of governments wanted to put money into re-stimulating the economy, like in the US with their $1 trillion investment into infrastructure, and that's now trickling down through the construction industry. And the problem around all of that growth in infrastructure is that there is a skilled labor shortage all around the world. Now, this is a statistic in the US, but it's the same for any of the developed world, where 41% of the construction workforce are expected to retire by 2031. So that will have an enormous impact. There's also, the baby boomers that are retiring. If they're working in the construction industry, that's having a direct impact as well. So all around the world, that sort of attraction and retention of talent and having the right people with the right skills on the projects is becoming a critical issue. On the next slide, you can see that PMI did our own research a few years ago. We wanted to look at how efficient or not the construction industry is. So our research from the Pulse of the Profession survey showed that 72% of projects experience delays, 73% of projects end over budget, and 70% of projects experience some sort of scope creep. So if you put that into dollar terms, for every $1 billion spent, $127 million is wasted. And that's actually the highest globally compared to other industries. So it actually shows that the construction industry is the most wasteful. On the next slide, we at PMI decided to do something about this. It was in fact one of our partners, it was Saudi Aramco, that came to us and said, the PMP is fantastic, but is there something specific for the construction industry that we can develop? And we said, look, we'd be happy to develop it, but let us do some research, as you saw on the previous slides, and also determine, is this a place that the PMI should be playing in? Can we add value? Can we do something that others have not done before? So when we started speaking to people, the overwhelming response was yes. So we started working with those that wanted to help us develop the course, but also we reached out to others that had no association with PMI and asked them, would they like to get involved in this as well? And they said yes. So we have what's called the expert panel. So here are some of the companies: US Department of Energy, US Army Corps, Petronas, Jacobs, BHP, DPR. So there's a mix of developers, contractors, consultants firms, and we also had both the Lean Construction Institute and the Construction Industry Institute out of the University of Texas. They're two other not-for-profit organizations that have contributed their decades of knowledge and working in the construction industry as well. So we all got together. This was during COVID, so everything was virtual, but we literally for 1 year workshopped on, what are the pain points that we're seeing in the construction industry. We narrowed them down into a handful of different items. And then we started saying, okay, we know what the problems are. What can we do to solve those problems? And that's what we worked through throughout the next 12 months. So on the next slide, these are actually the pain points that we came up with. The first one, and actually was the number one issue, was ineffective communication. So it can be due to a multitude of different reasons. It could be the fact that people are speaking different languages, or it might just be cultural differences where maybe some cultures, they're not willing to speak up even if they know something is wrong. It could be due to lack of process or systems, or many, many different things, but it is the number one issue. I think the other thing to remember is that communication, only 7% of it is verbal, which every time I say that, it blows my mind, because it's amazing to think that 7% is verbal, 38% is non-verbal. So that's your tonality or how you say something, and a huge 55% is about your body language. And that just goes to show that if you need to be aware of that, and you need to manage that as part of the process. The second item was scope creep. I think every single person on the call today will have experienced that in fairly significant ways on their projects. The key is learning how to deal with it. We know it's going to happen. How do we deal with it? The next one's on interface management. That's a significant issue, particularly as the projects get larger. So, of course, with multiple packages that are going on, I worked at the Marina Bay Sands project where there was just thousands of different packages. It was almost impossible to know the guy next to you, what was his scope of work. And what happens is that there is either an overlap in that scope or there's a gap. So that's something that's really common as well. The next one was on interface management. Sorry, I was mixing those up a little bit in terms of the scope creep and the interface management. But the interface management obviously is the gaps between the packages. So the next one is poor design and execution. And often there is initial finger pointing to, say, the architects or the engineers in, why is the design like this? But our research shows it's not usually due to poor design as a result of the ability of those parties. It's really about not having sufficient time up front in pre-construction phases. So not having the time to do that design well. It's also about not including all of the stakeholders early enough. So if you're building a hotel, the operator needs to be involved, and usually they're not, because that's something that's done later on. So you need to have all of the right people in the room. You need to understand what it is that you're trying to achieve at the end of the day, so that you can make sure the design is fit for purpose. The next one was on the poor procurement process. There's a lack of standardization in the way that companies do the procurement itself, and again, the processes are poor. And what we find is that it's a very cutthroat industry. So let's say a contractor is bidding on a piece of work. Usually they're very low margins. So if there's any mistake made, either at the tendering phase or during the construction phase, the natural instinct by the contractor is to make up for those potential losses. And that could be detrimental to the end result of a project. Lack of standardized performance management. So we're becoming, very much data driven now, or the world is. Construction's probably lagging behind on that. And if we don't have the right data in front of us, then we can't improve, or worse still, it can really set up a project for incredible failure. There was a survey done a couple of years ago that showed in the construction industry, we are getting a lot better at gathering that data, but about 95% of the data is not used anywhere in any meaningful way. So yes, that's great that we're starting to gather that information, but we need to do something with it as well. And the last one is on poor innovation and technology adoption. Construction is way behind other industries in terms of, bringing that, new ways of doing things into the industry. We have, old people like me that say, well, we've done it for 20 years in this way. Why do I need to change? So it's really important to understand how technology can help. I think, you need to see how it can help you be more efficient. It can help you do things faster. It can help you do things in a much safer way as well. So the good news is we've identified the pain points. We have also developed the PMI-CP to map those pain points and ensure that we've got some ways of mitigating or eliminating those issues on a project. So that's what we'll go through today. So on the next slide, this was just a map that actually one of our construction, we have what's called construction ambassadors, has put together, which I thought was really cool. It just showed the growth of the certification that was launched last year around the world. So we're really getting some good coverage here, as you can see. Obviously, North America, where we do have a lot of focus for PMI, that's obviously the most developed in this way. We've had over 14,000 people now take our e-learning courses. I think there's about 150 of those in New Zealand, which is great, and there's about 360 in Australia as well. And across those two, we have about 10 certification holders as well. So we're very proud of what we've been able to put together in a fairly short period of time, and we're also proud that it's very much industry-led, industry telling us what to do, and then PMI just facilitating and putting that course together. So thank you, and I'll hand you back over to Mike.
Nice one. Thanks, Ben. And team, if you've got some questions or comments along the way, again, just use the chat and we'll pick those up. But for those of you who are either familiar or not familiar with the broader spectrum of certification from PMI, I thought I'd put together a bit of a slide to sort of outline what's on offer from PMI and where sort of PMI-CP fits. And the general, maybe mainstream approach or maybe alternative approaches to get towards CP. Ultimately, there's 3 tiers here. So entry-level experience, senior management. And as I said, I can see a few of you who are familiar with have their CAPM or PMP. They are kind of PMI's flagship certifications, been around for a long time. They are broad. They cover all things, traditional waterfall approaches, right through to adaptive and agile approaches, and increasingly so, quite broad in terms of process focus, but also around people and environment focus as well. Several years ago, PMI started releasing specialized certifications, which was designed for certain roles or certain industries. And this is kind of where the CP certification sits. So they've had their business analyst certification for a while, their scheduling practitioner certification for a while, and their risk management practitioner as well. A couple of years ago, they launched CP. And yeah, as Ben says, it's sort of growing some interest. There are 2 tiers now. There didn't used to be, but there are 2 tiers where there is as we'll get to on the next couple of slides, there are some base content to address some of those pain points that Ben talked about to get a PMI-CP certification. And then if you want to do some extended learning beyond that, you can get a senior certified practitioner as well. Now, for those who are familiar with or work in this industry, there are some agile certifications which PMI have had for, say, 10 plus years as well. So that's where it sits. How to get to CP, comparisons to PMP, should I do both, should I do one? Generally speaking, PMI would encourage people to do a general certification first to open up your eyes around global best practice and all project management, not specific to your industry. So at least you have broad horizons, broad thinking in terms of your approach to your role. It means that you're hopefully better equipped to work with other organizations who have slightly different flavors of project delivery than what maybe you do. And then choose to specialize based on your industry. Now, that's not the only way to do it. If you have limited funds, limited time, which I know is the case for everybody, if I'm looking at PMP versus PMI-CP, then you can just choose one. You can go straight for CP. I have had some advice where people will recommend doing at least CAPM first to be familiar with, I guess, the broader context of PMI, best practice theory, and the examination approach. That will make it easier to get onto CP. But again, there's no other certification prerequisites that you need. In terms of those prerequisites to get CP, though, you do need some experience. That experience must be for at least 3 years of on-the-job experience running projects in the construction industry or the built environment industry. Okay, has to be within the last 10 years, just like a lot of other PMI certifications. By having that badge, it means you have recent experience. PMI make quite a clear point. They don't want people who practice 30 years ago to use that experience to how construction happens today, because as you know, it's different. And beyond that, you need to complete 4 courses. So what are those courses and how does that work? And this is what Millpond are just offering to the market right now. So we have, just like if you've been through a PMP course, we do that over 5 days. We're condensing the material for PMI-CP over 5 days as well. We can do that over 10 afternoons or evenings or morning slots to do some virtual sessions. It really depends on your appetite for in-person delivery versus virtual delivery, or whether you want us to do this on site at your premise as well. Our pricing is very similar to a PMP course as well. The cost to us to use this CP materials are slightly higher, so therefore we've just increased the prices for this course compared to a PMP as well. But again, there's discount for PMI members, and should you want to do an in-house course, we can offer discounts beyond that for a cohort of your team members. But ultimately, what's involved in the content? There are 4 modules, 4 papers, if you like, for courses within this course. The first one, coming back to those pain points around communication, and this is probably the biggest one. It's got the most content. And what's unique to this particular part, unlike any other PMI certifications or training courses you may have been on, there is a little assessment to complete as part of your eligibility to go through to get your PMI-CP. So it's almost like think of it a mini exam. It's an assessment. It's 30 questions. You can try and try again. There's no sort of failure fee, if you like. So it's a little bit safer, but a good warm-up to the actual CP exam. Beyond communications, there's scope and change order management. Again, another pain point that's been highlighted. There's also interface management, bringing it all together, plugging it all in. And of course, contract and risk management, which I'm sure a lot of you can relate to the challenges around that in your industry. So once you complete those 4 modules over this training program, that allows you to be eligible, unlocks the door to then go and book and apply for your PMI-CP exam. If you go through this and you're hungry for more, then that's when SCP comes into play, the Senior Certified Practitioner, or Construction Practitioner, sorry, where you can go through and do 3 further modules around performance materials, around technology innovation, and execution and planning. Little note there that 2 of those have that little mini assessment on that as well. In terms of the exam, the domains, so again, if you're familiar with PMI exams, there is an exam content outline. They break down the exam made by domains, and that gives you an indication of the ratio of questions by topic. So 50% around contract, 50% around, or 30% around stakeholders, 15% strategy and scope, and 5% on governance. The exam itself is 120 questions over 3 hours and 50 minutes. Again, if I compare this to PMP, 3 hours and 50 minutes, same time frame, but PMP, 180 questions versus 120 questions. So therefore, hopefully less time pressure. I'll let Brandon talk to this based on his experience shortly. You do get 2 10-minute breaks. If you did your PMP exam many years ago, you wouldn't have got any breaks. So at least PMI kinder now and giving you a chance to take a breath of fresh air before you resume. Just take note, and should you go on a training course with us, we'll make this very, very clear. But think of this as almost 3 modules to your exam, where you complete a section of questions, enter a 10-minute break, and then once you resume from that break, you cannot go back to that previous module of questions. It's sort of a one-way street. Of course, PMI don't want you to exit the room, do a whole bunch of reading, come back and change all your answers. Grading, there's no pass mark. It's not as if you get 50% and above of questions correct, you pass. There's a grading system of needs improvement, below target, at target, or above target. Okay, just like, again, if you got a prior PMI certification, it's the same sort of system. You do get an indicative pass on the day of your exam, but the official confirmation comes within 24 to 48 hours afterwards. And just like any other certification, there is a renewal fee, 30 PDUs. And the nice thing about this is PDUs you attribute to your PMP certification or your CAPM certification or your ACP certification can be attributed to CP as well. So no double entry there. So Brandon, I'd like you to please share with the group a bit about your experience in studying the exam, how it's helped you in your day job.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So team, what I want to go through right now is, as Mike said, my journey, which was quite a long and laborious one as one of the early students and badge owners, but I want to take you on that journey, and I got a few bullet points here to discuss them. First, with the construction management trials and tribulations. Look, the main reasons why I decided to pursue the certification was due to a few. Number one, how can I improve communication? Specifically, how can I better improve the use of a war room, big room, Obaya? You guys might have heard of something called a war room before in construction projects. And especially when I'm catering these to the JV and alliance contracting models. So what's good to hear is, some of the people on the call are from Australia, New Zealand. If you worked on big engagements, you probably came across those type of contracting models. But how can I use something called a big room to better my communications? Now with the big room, I've used them before, but I didn't see the intended benefits from such a communication model type historically. This course for communications cleared that one up for me. Number two, in respect to scope management, how can I better implement this thing called value engineering during construction? Do I truly understand what the concept is and the right workflow to successfully implement with all my stakeholders? Look, I do a lot of work in the engineering design space, came across the concept of value engineering, but I really didn't see it fully implemented within the pre-construction construction phases. How can I do a better job of implementing that? That was captured in scope management. That made me a little bit better in that space. It was great. The third thing, this concept of interface management, we talked about it earlier on an earlier slide. Sure, I've been on construction projects that had someone tagged to being this thing called an interface manager, interface coordinator, but what should have been that person's responsibility? And what should have been their role and responsibilities? What should they look like? On my projects, I witnessed a person being onboarded well into construction phase, and they were tagged as a coordinator to support a struggling project for the construction manager or their project director to try to get it right back on the rails. But there had to be more to the practice. This module covered that one off for me, so I'm really excited about sharing that with you guys on the course. And then the last thing, a trial and tribulation I went through, was I consistently witnessed my key stakeholders not understanding contract clauses, contract types, the life cycle of a contract management. If you're on the call, maybe you came across some of this terminology within the actual contracts themselves. Maybe you heard about it through the contract management team, through your legal team. Obviously, it's never good when they come on board. Dispute resolution process. How do we do that across ANZ projects? I knew them due to my role, but I didn't feel as comfortable of actually implementing them from day one. And I also, throughout my career, I've witnessed this knowledge gap with PMPs, and especially people who've worked in the pre-construction phases of a project. This module was the first time I'd truly come across a comprehensive learning to aid me in lifting that knowledge gap in that area. So I was really excited that PMI had a strong focus in that space. Something you didn't necessarily see within CAPM or PMP. Next bullet we'll talk about it's what's new and already evolved, being the early adopter. As I said, I was one of the newer people of the cohort that came on board to invest and get it. I was actually the second person in New Zealand. And luckily, by being that early person, I was able to provide some feedback to the great work that the PMI team, like Ben and company, have already done. So while it's a new certification, it's not too brand new, as Mike said, it's been out for a couple of years. But like all new initiatives, feedback and applying the concept of continuous improvement or Kaizen, if you've come across that in some of the CAP and PMP courses, that coming from me and others provided a real solid offering for PMI. And now it's really great to see that newer version that's tweaked, it's available for you now. So that's really good. Next bullet, the course content and the value of my own notes. Look, I felt the content and the quality of the e-learnings that Mike talked about before, they were applicable to my past and present projects. However, as relatively new product and as an early student, I wasn't sure if the content would prepare me for the assessments that were attached to some of the modules, as well as the capstone exam. This was the first time I've gone through a course without having any instructor led. So the risk and my insecurities were a little bit high, if I'm honest. So to mitigate that risk, I took extensive notes along with the e-learnings just to be sure I was on the right path. And then luckily my notes, which complemented the e-learnings and my experiences in construction, they got me an above target score in all the four domains. So I'm pretty happy for myself. I also felt that the CP complements and extends beyond the content of the PMP. So kind of adding on to what Mike said a bit earlier, do one before the other or concurrently. Look, for CAPM or PMP people who are on the call, you'll find the material that you did cover in those courses. However, there will be content and terminology that goes beyond the PMBOK that is specifically catered to the construction industry. So you will pick up something out of that, especially if you want to specialize in the construction industry that Mike indicated earlier. Now, for some people have asked about the relevancy of this course across A and Z compared to global projects, and this really adds on to what Ben and Mike mentioned earlier. And take a look at the little blog. So there's a QR code there on the screen. I go into more detail about this question that a lot of people have been asking. And look, I talk about how PMI approach clients, contractors, and consultants globally, including A and Z, just like what Ben mentioned earlier. And this was to ensure that the content was regionally agnostic and it catered to all areas of construction management that construction teams would interact with. I found that construction specific terminology, technology, which was definitely new compared to PMP, and the contracting modules discussed were definitely A and Z applicable. So rest assured, this is applicable here, even though, you know, as we saw in the graphic, a lot of people in North America have completed this, and PMI being a US based entity, this is applicable in this part of the world. Next bullet, talk about the communications module, the mini assessment, just go a little bit more in depth of what Mike just mentioned earlier. Look, the concept of the mini assessments, it was new to me because I hadn't gone across these before in my other PMI certified courses. Some modules, like you saw in the previous slide, communications, will have this 30 question assessment. And again, you must pass before you meet all the requirements to sit the capstone exam. You take this after completing the e-learning module, and same thing like Mike showed. If you're interested in the senior construction professional, the other two out of three will also have it. Now, the assessment, what it does, it confirms that you have mastered the detailed concept described in the module, preparing you for a taste of how the capstone exam will be like. I found that the assessment was really in detailed. It went through the extended further readings that you would do on top of the e-learning. So you really had to keep focus on that whole module. Whereas the capstone exam took a little bit step back, more of a broader approach. And we'll talk about that here in the next little bullet. Now, you may be wondering, well, how can we be better prepared so we don't kind of go in blind like you, Brandon? Well, good news for you. I personally took my own challenging notes and my challenging mock assessments that I can share with you, that you better prepare you for taking the assessment once it's that time of day. And obviously, I would share these with you within the Mill Pond course, so you'd have something to work with. And the next bullet, talk about the CP exam. Look, as for the exam, as mentioned earlier, 120 questions, it's timed, predominantly situational. And if you have taken other PMI course examinations in the past, this will look familiar to you. PMI broke the exam up into optional breaks, just like Mike said. So after 40 questions, you got a little 10-minute break, and you would obviously review your questions before you take the break. And then once you pass that, you can't go back to those questions. They're done with. Then you do the same thing from question number 41 through 80, optional break. Same thing again once you get to the end of the exam of 120 questions, so you can review questions 81 through 120. Exam is timed, as you saw in the previous slide. There are 230 minutes. But for me, I wanted to be sure that I moved at a good pace, similar to my experiences on past PMI certification exams. But if this is new to you, rest assured, go through the training course, and I will share with you my study method of how I moved quite well throughout the exam. And look, personally, when I took the exam, I had plenty of time left over when it was all said and done. The other thing I want to talk about here is the comparisons with the PMP and obviously with the exam center. Look, in comparison to PMP, I found the amount of material captured in the e-learnings, which is a combination of slides, additional downloads, additional readings, to be nearly as much content as found in the PMP. Now that may sound a bit daunting, but I'll explain. So PMI, they solidified this certification to be, look, the gold standard for construction management, just like the PMP is the gold standard for project management. I think Ben would back me on that statement. No content was missed by PMI, and this course should not be treated lightly. And a lot of dedicated studying post the completion of the e-learning modules will be required for students. And again, the course I provide will cover off a tailored study plan for you to be successful. The PMP, I find, requires more effort in mapping exercises across knowledge areas, in which is key to its exam. So just like if past experience CAPM PMP, you know about the inputs and outputs within knowledge areas and tools and techniques. CP doesn't go into that type of depth of learning, but there is a little bit that you'd find within the interface management and within the contract and risk management modules. And as Mike said, the little cherry on top is there's not as many questions as you'd find on the PMP. So that's a nice little bonus for us. And as an opinion, in other PMI exam courses, the CP can be performed at your local testing center or at the comfort of your home. So I know if you took like the ACP, you had that option. The exam is proctored for anybody who's new to the PMI exam world. So yes, Big Brother is watching you. But look, I personally find it more comforting to take the exam at a test center with the real person at site to support me if there was any technical issues, and to use the kitchen and their toilet when I want to take the optional breaks. For me, the last thing I'd want is to be sitting at home and my electricity goes out. Or I think I talked with Ben just the other day, you get a little pop-up saying that, oh, you got a software being running, and it pops up with the administrator. So we don't want to have any technical issues.
That was
so that's
one of the most stressful things in my life, with 10 minutes left in the exam, and it popped up and said, this software is not allowed. So I had to rush around and get rid of it. So I know where you're coming from.
And look, the last bullet there, when we talk about values, that's what it really ultimately means at the end of the day. This is an investment of your time and finances. Look, I'd like to reflect on how the course has helped me. Immediately, I found myself applying active listening each day in my home office and at site, a key concept within the communication module. This has enhanced my communication negotiation skills with my stakeholders and at the home front as well. So this is more of a personal message for everybody out there. Look, and I thought I knew what listening was, but this opened my eyes up another way. In my consultation roles that I provide for clients, I've upskilled my stakeholders already on site and better using the big room. I've applied the concept of the last planner system, if anybody knows about LPS, within execution planning for hybrid projects. I've utilized commitment-based relationships. Very interesting topic within the course we would talk about. Interface management, we talked about it a few times, doing it the right way, and upskilled my teams within contract management. So I see this course as being a requirement by clients in bids for the future, similarly to how I've currently seen PMP requirements for PMs. Due to the research stats that Ben talked about earlier, we have to make a change in how we manage our construction projects. And lastly, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about how the world's being impacted by technology. We know that construction has been slow to transition to many areas of technology for many reasons. This course will shed a light on how such technological approaches and how we can immediately implement them to new concepts on our projects without much pushback from your stakeholders that I've gone through, and I'm sure you have as well. You might already be using some of the innovative ideas out there, but I'm sure you'll come across something new and immediately apply to your construction projects. So with that said, I think we got one more slide, Mike. And if so, Ben, you want to finish us off with some final comments about the CERT benefits envisioned by PMI?
Sure. Thanks, Brandon. Look, first of all, I probably just referring to parts of what you were saying there in terms of instructor-led training versus doing it online through the e-learning. And I did it the same as you, Brandon, in terms of taking the e-learning modules. What I feel is that going through trainers such as Millpond, it really helps to reduce the stress level. You know, someone else has done it before. And it just gives you the comfort to know that there are ways of working through the content. I think also it helps to make it more relevant to you. So even in the chat, I saw comments about Australia and New Zealand contracts, and Millpond can help in linking those referrals and making it more relevant. So I think that's important. And the other thing is that it really helps in getting a cadence to your study. You know, everybody is busy. It's difficult to say, I'm going to study at this time and make sure I get that done. And if you're doing it yourself, not everyone is driven to do it themselves. So it really helps to be working with others and just following a program. Then the bigger picture in terms of, the industry itself, it doesn't have a great reputation for, one, looking after its employees, and two, looking after the planet. So, you know, with the construction industry contributing about 37% of global greenhouse gas emissions, it's really important that we do something about that. We need to make the industry more efficient. We need to make it more sustainable. So that's really what we tried to focus on. How do we achieve those key outcomes? And in my opinion, it's a very practical course built in conjunction with the industry. So it's not just PMI telling you what to do. It's very much the industry telling us what needs to be focused on. It has real life case studies that are used throughout the course content. And as I said, that can also be through the training. Millpond can potentially even look at real life case studies that you have and weave that into the curriculum as well. So I can see this would have been enormous earlier in my career, and we've had a few other people say that as well. I wish we had this 20 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever it might be. So that's it. I think right now I can't see the screen for some reason, but in terms of, I've covered those key elements of making the industry more efficient. It does help us with attraction and retention of talent, because if you're investing in your teams, they can see that their future, their career is being protected by you. It's being invested in by them, and that helps to create this real stickiness with an organization. If your employer is putting you through these courses, giving you the best possible skills, you're more likely to stay with them, to reinvest that time and effort into delivering good projects. So I would highly recommend it, and I think now we can open up for some questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Brandon, for sharing those words. And yeah, and team, just to sort of close off before we go into questions, just hopefully that gives you the context in terms of where it's come from, what we're looking to achieve in terms of PMI, looking to address some concerns in construction, and how, through the conversation from the gentleman, hopefully how it's relevant and applicable to your industry. Over the years, PMP has got quite broad, so therefore it's lost some direct value to construction practitioners, and hopefully this is now going to not only replace that, provide a lot more. And coming back to that point that we raised on an earlier slide with Brandon is while it's new, it's not brand new that you would be guinea pigs. It's gone through a number of years of iterations, early adopters, feedback, and that feedback's been brought on board, and it's now a good, robust knowledge set, a good, robust process to go through. So I'm quite excited by that. So anyway, that's us, team. Questions. I think we're right on schedule. Well, 1 minute late. That's a good project plan, isn't it? A good, well-managed project. Who's got some questions for us? Is there anything anyone would like to know? Feel free to unmute yourself. I feel like we've answered a lot of the questions that have come through the chat already so far, but is there anything further we can help with?
Hi, I do have a question. My name is Marcel. I am the construction ambassador of PMI Melbourne chapter. And I'm doing the PMI-CP course myself. I have completed actually the course, and I'm just ready to take the exam. My question is there any mock test to prepare us for the exam? I feel like I'm missing some practice, something that could help me with the exam.
So you need to come and have a coffee with me. I know we've spoken to each other, but we need to catch up. There is no mock exam other than what Mike and Brandon can give you with sort of examples of the types of questions. The reason for that is it's not as well established as PMP yet, where we have lots of different exam questions. So we can't give you the actual exam questions because then you would know the answers. But we can definitely give you the right format for the questions, which I think is very important.
All right, so let's have this coffee then.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate for your time and the presentation.
And Marcel, I feel like I should introduce you to Sylvia McLaren as well. Sylvia on the call, and Sylvia looks after, there's a construction specialist group in New Zealand. So I feel like you guys could cross-pollinate and bridge the gap across the ditch.
Really? Yeah, definitely.
I'll make a little note to send an email to both of you so you've got each other's, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, great.
I'm gonna put in the chat my email address.
Sylvia is speaking at our conference, our LIM in Malaysia next week, and we'll be talking about her construction experience and also the early stages of taking the CP course as well. Hi, Sylvia.
And just to add to what Ben said, look, the course that Millpond would provide, Marcel, we'll go through the whole course. We'll go through the assessments, what those assessments would look like, and better prepare with mock assessments, and definitely just make sure the students understand that format and the style, situational type questions that you would see on the big capstone exam. We would provide a mock exam just to get the students a flavor of what they would actually go through, because we appreciate that there's going to be a number of people who've never took a PMI course before, and it may be quite some time since they took a proctored exam. So this would definitely give them that peace of mind.
Yes, because part of delivering a course, we want, by the time when people exit the course, ourselves as trainers want comfort that people have grasped the content of it. So we deliberately allow time within the material, or the teaching time, the content time, to go through the mock exams, reflect, answer questions, and help give that targeted advice. So definitely it's a big part of our offering, but it's not part of the e-learning things directly through PMI. Another question popped up around courses, dates and whereabouts, and ultimately, yes, we have our current course advertised online on our website, which again, we'll send you an email through after the call with some details. But there's end of September for an online course, and that's because it's brand new. We're looking to try and capture as many people as possible for that first online course. This will be, again, the first time we deliver it, so we're looking for as much feedback as possible. We're quite comfortable and confident with our approach, but like anything first time, we're going to reflect on that and make some adaptations. But we're happy to start scheduling some courses, in-person courses up and down New Zealand, across Australia. But again, if you feel like there's enough people, like say 5, 6, 7 people in your organization, maybe more, who would value of a targeted course, coming back to Ben and Brandon's point with some targeted conversations, translating or connecting global content to your way of working, then we can absolutely look at that as well. That's half our business is going to organizations, delivering either custom training for them or certifications through them for PMI. Any other questions, team? Very good. Well, thank you very much for spending your time with us. Hopefully you've all learned something. Hopefully it's a valuable session. Best of luck with the rest of your week. Best of luck for your projects. And please reach out to us if you would like us to help with anything further. Take care.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Mike.
Bye. Thanks.